Hi again everyone. Today we'll be going through some of the old telephones in my collection. We'll be starting off with these ones here. We've got some basic rotary phones. Phones like this were in use for quite a long time. It wasn't until the early 1980s that they started to be phased out and replaced with dial-pad phones instead. With these phones, to use them you would first lift the receiver like this, and you would dial the number by spinning this. So if your number started off with a 4, you would put your finger in the 4, turn it all the way back to that little handle there. This little handle here. And that's how you would dial the number. You had to be careful because there was no way to backspace. If you accidentally entered the wrong number, you would have to hang it up and start all over again. We've also got a cute little toy phone here. Some of you might be wondering why the numbers all have letters next to them. Although this is a toy phone, this is actually accurate to how a lot of phones were. Back then, phone numbers actually started with letters, and you would have to enter different letters depending on what area you were calling. For example, if you wanted to call Essendon, their area code was FU, so you would have to type in the letters FU before entering the rest of the number. This is actually an American toy phone, and because of that the letters are arranged a bit differently to how they would have been on an old Australian phone. I don't have any antique Australian phones, but I'll include a photo so you can get an idea of what the letter arrangement was like on those ones. This is a slightly different type of rotary phone. This is what was known as a candlestick phone. This isn't actually a real phone, this is just a decoration that looks like one, but it looks pretty much like the real thing. At the bottom you've got the numbers, and you would pick it up with the handle, dial the numbers, and you would take this out. You would take this piece out and hold it up to your ear and talk into that. And when you were done talking, the way you would hang them up was quite similar to the normal rotary phones. If we look at a normal one here, you can see two little white buttons. When you were done talking, you would just put the phone down, and the phone would weigh the buttons down and hang it up. This was quite similar. Once you were done talking, you would put the earpiece back on the handle, and the earpiece would weigh the handle down, and that would hang it up. This phone here is a little different. You wouldn't find one of these in a place like a home or a business. This was actually used by people repairing the telephone lines. Once they were done working on them, they would actually plug this phone right into the telephone wires, and they would actually use this phone to test to make sure that the phone lines were working, whether or not their repairs had worked. See there, it says please return to post office if found. If you're wondering why they would ask you to take these phones back to the post office, we'll talk about that a bit later. If you look closely there, it says Made in Telecom Workshops, Melbourne, Australia. There's a little hook you can use to hang it up on something. And we've got another phone here. I wasn't able to find much information on this one, but because of what it says at the front, Telephone Construction and Maintenance Company, South Melbourne, I think this was another phone used by people repairing the phone lines. And here we've got a slightly older phone. You might be wondering why there's nowhere you can enter the numbers on this phone, nowhere to dial. That's because these phones operate on a different system. How these would work is, you would pick up the receiver and crank the handle. And what this would do was, it would cause the bells to ring at a place called a switchboard. A switchboard was a place where all the phones went through in a local area. Most of them were located at post offices. At these places, you would have a bunch of operators sitting in front of a bunch of phone lines. And how these places worked was, once you got put through to the switchboard, you would be connected to an operator. And the operator would ask you who you wanted to call. You would tell them what number you wanted to call, and they would take your phone line and plug it in to the line you wanted to call. Turning this handle, like this, made the bells ring next to your number at the exchange, so they knew that you were calling. And once you were done, you would put the phone down, and then you would ring off. You would turn it again so that the operator knew that you were finished talking. Next up, we've got something a bit more unusual. For those of you who are interested in the military and the history of war, this is actually a military field phone from the Second World War. If you were a soldier and you had to call the field headquarters, you would use something like this to get in touch with the commanding officer. This is where you would connect the wires to. This one's quite battered and worn out. They were very shiny when they came out, but this one's been through quite a lot. Here it says press for buzzer call. And that would cause a small alarm to go off when you called them so that they knew you were calling. You would turn this. It's a bit harder to turn on this one. And that would cause the bells to ring on the other end of the phone. And give you a look inside of it. There's a little ball that hits the bells to make them ring. And I know that at least some of this phone is still in working order, because there was one time when I had my hand on one of these metal bits when someone else turned the handle, and it gave me a small electric shock, so it's still in at least partial working condition, this phone. And here we've got the Erico phone, also known as the Cobra phone for its shape. And these were made by a Swedish company, and they became quite popular in the late 1950s onwards. If you're wondering where the dialer is, there it is. The big red button in the middle there hangs it up, so when you finish talking, to hang it up, all you have to do is put it down. This was actually the first phone ever where the dialer and the receiver were a single piece, unlike the previous phones we've looked at where the dialer and the receiver were separate pieces. And finally, we've got some more recent but still very obsolete cell phones. We've got Nokia. No touchscreen on any of these phones, they were entirely button operated. Much older Nokia. I've put a $1 coin there so you have an idea of how big they are. Finally, a very old Philips mobile phone. Just imagine carrying this around in your pocket. Now most phones these days have a little computer inside them that stores all of the numbers that you call. That way you don't have to remember them yourself. But for a long time phones didn't actually have that ability. They couldn't remember numbers, you had to remember them yourself. Most people would write them down in things like this. These are little home phone directories. And how these things would work is you would write all of your contacts in there in alphabetical order. So say if I wanted to call my friend Gary, I would turn to the G. It's a bit rusted, this one. And I would open it. This one's a bit rusted and it's tricky to open, so I won't be able to open this one up for you, but I can give you a demonstration with this one. We'll try a different letter instead. Say I have a friend whose name is Simon, and I would write their number under the letter S. So, move the slider down to S. And there's all the S's. And there's where you would write down all of your S contacts. And here we've got our beautiful payphone booth. Public payphones have kind of fallen out of fashion over the last 10 years or so. You don't see them that much anymore because mobile phones have become so easy to get. But back in the day, you would find phone booths like this on pretty much every street corner. This thing was completely trashed when we found it. There was no color in it at all, no glass. But we took it home, gave it a nice paint job. We were lucky enough to find the little glass slide windows and the sign to put in it. And now it's good as new. Give you a look inside of it. And here you've got the phone. So you would put some money in the top here. Dial the number. And once you finish talking, you hang up the phone. And when this is clicked down, that hangs it up. I've been told that this particular type of payphone is called a long tom because of the long pole that the money goes down when you put it in. Alright, I think that's just about everything. Let's head on back outside. Huh? Oh dear. I appear to be stuck in here. This is a problem. Well, I'm sure someone will be along sooner or later to help me get out. I'm starting to think that no one's going to come along. So, how do I get out of this? Oh, wait! Hang on, I'm in a phone booth. I can just call for help. Oh, why didn't I think of that before? Well, let's see. Oh. Never mind. Oh, well then, I suppose this is as good a time as any to start panicking. So, let's start panicking.